Good afternoon, folks. Thanks to those of you that have arrived bang on time. Congratulations. I do like good timekeeping. I'm just going to give a couple of minutes for other people to join us, and then we will get going. Put some what I hope were interesting sales facts on the screen for you to have a little look at as you wait. And maybe if you can get those fingers typing and let me know where you're joining us from. UK, US, Bali, where in the world are you? Just whichever platform you're on, whether it's LinkedIn or YouTube, just introduce yourself, maybe your name and where you are joining the webinar from. That will be helpful. Give people a chance to get a flavor of each other, and we'll start in just a couple of minutes' time. Okay, just another 30 seconds and we'll get going. Okay, I think we're there. So thanks again for your patience, those who have been waiting, and thanks to everyone for taking an hour out of your day today to join me. My name's Paul Owen. I'm the founder of the True Sales Company, and I'm going to be talking to you today about the 3 principles that I believe underpin selling successfully on the phone. And if we want to be really good at that, I think each of these principles is going to help us. So I'd like to start with a lesson from the world of medicine before we even talk about sales. But before I even share the agenda with you for today's session, I want to talk about a lesson from the world of medicine. This is a story captured fully in a book by Atul Gawande called The Checklist Manifesto. And in this, he talks about a challenge in 2004 that brought the World Health Organization together, trying to bring the best surgical minds from around the world together to solve a problem. And the problem was, across the millions and millions and millions of operations that take place across the world, over 4,000 different procedures done in hundreds of thousands of different environments. The figures were quite shocking in some of the results that were happening. And in 2004, there were 7 million disabilities caused through surgery, unnecessary disabilities caused through surgery. And frighteningly, there were 1 million deaths. And Atul Gawande, along with a group of other surgeons, were brought together to try and solve this problem. And A huge problem to try and solve. And what they ended up coming up with, as you might guess from the title of the book, is a checklist, the checklist manifesto. And the checklist, it's so simple, it's crazy. The checklist was a list of elements that the surgeons and the surgical teams were asked to follow, as checklists of things they're asked to do when at the beginning and the end of operations. Things like washing your hands. It sounds crazy, I know. Things like making sure all the equipment is there, that there is blood available on site, that there is enough anesthetic, that at the end of operations, making sure all the instruments were visible and could be seen. They had things like making sure that each person around the table introduced themselves by name and by role, because it's shown that people work better together when they know each other's names. So a very simple checklist was put together. And then they ran an experiment. They ran a pretty large experiment across 2 years in many different settings. And then the results were in. There were over 4,000 operations that had the checklist manifesto applied to them. Those results were stark. What they found over those 2 years and the 4,000 operations, that disabilities caused by surgery were reduced by 36%, and deaths caused by surgery were reduced by 47%. Really alarming figures. And what the checklist manifesto really illustrated, and the reason I wanted to share it with you today, is that those kind of numbers and that process shows that it's a very different thing to consider the simple, obvious things we should do and turn them into the simple, obvious things we actually do. There was nothing on that checklist that any medical professional would be unaware of, but they weren't doing it. And as you may have guessed, my angle in using the checklist manifesto as my opening for the presentation today is to illustrate in that world that truth, and to transfer, or to ask you to transfer that idea to our world of sales. There are simple, obvious things we know we should do. Simple, obvious things as salespeople or as sales managers or as managing directors we know we should do. We just don't do them often enough. So a word along those lines to help you make the most of your time with me today is that when I share ideas with you around these three principles, I'll give some examples of them in action. Don't think, do I know this? Think, how well do I do this? That's the key. It isn't what we know that makes us successful. It's what we do that makes us successful, whether that is performing surgery or making sales. So what am I going to talk to you about today? Well, you're going to walk away with three things I would suggest. You're going to understand the foundations of sales success, particularly telesales, selling over the phone. I have some ideas that you should be able to put into practice immediately, this afternoon, tomorrow, whatever that might be. And to support that implementation, I have some free resources to help you do that. Broadly speaking, I'm obviously, as you might guess from the title of the webinar, going to share with you the three principles of selling better over the phone. I'm also going to share with you a 4-step structure that we teach people to enable them to be more successful in selling over the phone. And of course, there'll be a little teaser or introduction to what we do, and if you like the content from today, how you might be able to engage with us to take things further. But it is very much my aim in the next hour that whether you speak to us again or not in the future, you walk away with some value for the hour that you have given us today. I wanted to briefly introduce myself for those who've not met me before, and the line there at the top of the page captures my enthusiasm for sales, because sales genuinely changed my life. By the way, if you're in sales, it changed yours too, but it might not have been as stark a change as the one I had. So I was 32, completely broke, all my own fault, nobody else to blame, just completely messed up my career in my 20s, lacking direction. People had said to me for quite a few years, you should go into sales. I fell into that trap of the cultural snobbery we have around sales. I was too good for that world, I thought. In fact, I was so good, I was earning £8,000 a year doing data admin. and close to £30,000 in debt on mostly 9 credit cards, accruing interest. I got myself in a bad place. And part of that, well, all of that was my fault, but part of that where sales was concerned was around my ignorance about sales. I got my first sales job. I started on December the 4th in the year 2000, a day I will never forget. And that job utterly changed my life within 3 years. I was able to pay off all my debt. I was able to actually buy a flat to live in with my girlfriend, who is now my wife. And everything about it changed my life. I've been selling ever since, so 20 plus years of selling, and then 10 plus years of sales training. And that experience I had with sales through my own ignorance has sort of given me my mission, if you like, of what I'm trying to do with True Sales Company, which is, first of all, change the perception of sales and then help everyone to sell more effectively. So I'm first and foremost a salesperson. I'll touch a few times today about the difference between execution and theory. And I think it's really important for trainers and also for many managers to make sure they keep selling. So it's important that I'm still a salesperson. I still sell every day. And that's important for the execution side. But I've been training. I've been training for over 10 years now. I started with the likes of EMC and Dell and Intel and lots of big technology names. I've worked across healthcare. Done a lot of work in commercial property and construction and so on. I've got a few clients logos I will show you in a moment. So I've been selling for quite a long time, and I've been training for quite a long time. I am passionate about sales. I'm an evangelist for sales, I like to think. I host a podcast, the True Sales Podcast, which comes out once a week on a Thursday. So I went live this morning with, what did I do for this morning? Yes, it's 5 non-sales books that can help you sell better. So a quick overview of those 5 books. You can find it on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, all the usual places. And also I wrote a book a few years ago, Secret Skill, Hidden Career, the surprising link between sales ability and your career success, with a bit of clever marketing and hopefully some good ideas. Became an Amazon bestseller a few years ago. So very much an evangelist, very much a salesperson who then also does training. Just a few logos there, from tech to commercial property to healthcare and so on, of different clients that I have worked with over the years. And of course, if you want to find out more, you should have all the details on the messages we've sent you about today's webinar. But just a reminder there of our email address, and I'll repeat that a bit later if anyone wants to get in touch with us directly. So let's crack on. What are the 3 principles of selling better on the phone? Well, these 3 principles inform the way I sell, the way I run the company, True Sales, and also the way that we train people to sell. And those 3 values, those 3 principles you can see on the screen, they are honesty, consistency, and confidence. And over the next half hour, I just want to explain to you a little bit more about why those seemingly obvious things are not done day in, day out by many people, and how when you do them, how it changes the way you see your job, the way you see yourself, and the way clients interact with you. Okay, so let's start with honesty. Whenever I ask people this question, I typically start any training course I run, whether that's a live online session like this or face-to-face training. I ask people, what is sales? Which, to a room of salespeople, of course, sounds ridiculous, but it's an important question. Typically, people will answer along the lines of that first line there. It's exchange of money for product or service. We offer solutions to people's problems, or we're serving a need. All those things are true, but I don't think they get to the heart of what sales really is. Because I think sales is helping people make good buying decisions. That's what we do. We can't sell products and services to people who don't have a need. Well, we can. I just don't think that's what sales is. I was offered a book some years ago, and my apologies to the author, particularly if they're on this webinar, but it was called How to Sell Anything to Anybody. And I immediately knew that I wouldn't buy that book, because I don't think that's what sales is. I don't think my job is to sell anything to anybody. I think our job is to help people make good buying decisions. So they need to be in a process of looking to buy, and then we help them. When you then step back from that and think, well, if we accept that, what's the biggest block? What's the number one thing that stops us from helping people make a good buying decision when they are in the buying process. And the biggest thing that stops us is we don't find out the truth about their needs. So ultimately, at the very heart of sales, I think, is a mission, and it's a worthy mission. And that is that sales is the search for truth. It's not money for product. It's not solutions to problems. It's not serving needs, or not primarily anyway. It's a search for truth. So why am I so passionate about that, and why does it matter? Well, I'm partly passionate about it because I think that one of the challenges in the sales world, from hiring people to retaining them to having successful sales teams, is the misconception that sales is about trying to force people to buy things rather than trying to help people to buy things. It makes the recruitment challenge so much bigger for all of you. It can make retention difficult. And it also often dictates the way we manage our sales teams and our telesales teams. So I think we should all work together. I'm a fellow of the Institute of Sales Professionals, who have just endorsed our training programs that happened only recently. And the idea of the Institute is that good people in the sales world come together to do sales properly, and to let people know that a trusted sales professional is the place you should go for your transactions. So I think there's a cultural perception and belief that I think is addressed by putting honesty first. But I think it has some other knock-on effects. I think first and foremost, when you see it as being the search for truth, I think it triggers us to ask questions and to be curious. Any of us, hopefully in sales, we've learned in our years of doing it that it's much better to, much more successful to learn by asking questions, and we build connection with people than we can ever learn by just talking at people. Ironically, the way I'm now talking to you. So sorry about that. But hopefully, if we can book a call and come and book some work together, you'll see that I like to ask questions, and I'm curious to find out about people. So we think about searching for truth. It triggers us to be curious. Secondly, I think it changes how we think about our job. We have, particularly in telesales roles, lots of negative reaction or negative feedback from people. Either they're too busy to talk to us, or it wasn't the right time, or they think they're not interested, or whatever it might be. And the danger can be when we keep hearing evidence that's telling us negative messages, we can start to believe or think negatively about our job. When we go back to think, I'm just trying to find out the truth. Once I find out the truth, then I believe I can help. It allows us to bolster our belief in the job we do. And within that, I think that has a knock-on effect to how we think about ourselves. Again, if you're constantly calling people, whether it's warm leads or cold outbound or whatever it might be, and we start to, I often think that in telesales, the danger is we start the job and our shoulders are back and we're proud and away we go. I've got my phone and I've got my computer and I've got my desk and here I go. And little by little, if we're not careful, we can get beaten down by the relative lack of success we have in outbound calling in particular. And it starts to change how we think about ourselves. We start to belittle the role that we play in sales. And that's a very, very dangerous place to be as a salesperson. So when we think about searching for the truth, we are triggered to ask questions, we change how we think about the job, and we change how we think about ourselves. I want to give you an example of that cultural perception around sales and why. Quite a few years ago, that my wife and I hosted at home. My wife used to be in the banking world, in investment banking, and she invited round a small group of her old colleagues, which is great, nice people. But as naturally happens in all such gatherings, they talk about banking. That's how they all know each other. I am surplus to requirements. I'm there to clear the table, top up wine glasses, and so on. And at some stage later in the evening, maybe it was 11:30, somebody turned and said, "So, Paul, how's your business?" And I gave a short reply, which involved partly mentioning a couple of new salespeople I'd taken on, and they were doing so well in their outbound calling that actually I was in that wonderful position as a company owner where they were getting me too many meetings to go and meet prospective clients. Anyway, my explanation lasted about 30 seconds before somebody jumped in with, "Oh, I can't imagine a worse job, calling people up that don't want to talk to you, trying to sell them things they neither want nor need." And this opinion gathered weight around the table, effectively all complaining about sales, which I was thinking at the back of my mind, I find a bit rich coming from a team of investment bankers who spend all of their lives selling, but just don't call it sales. And once they had finished, I said, can I just come back to you on your points? We're not calling people that don't want our services. We're not calling people that don't have a need. We've done our homework. We've researched companies. They have a certain size sales team, and we've got a pretty good track record of helping teams like them. So we're calling up to offer our help with them. And so they do want our help. They just don't know that yet. And the reply to that from the collector group, albeit a few glasses in, was, oh, my goodness, Paul, you sound like such a typical salesperson. And maybe they're right. But that belief matters. That recognition, that belief system I have, which is I'm just trying to find out the truth. I'm trying to find out about your team and if you have these needs. And if you don't, great, we will leave you in peace and we'll move on. But if you do have these needs, then here's how we think we can help. And I think having that view fundamentally changes how you feel, particularly if you're making cold outbound calls. We're not there to pester. We're not there to push. We're there to nudge sometimes, don't get me wrong, but we are genuinely trying to find out about their needs, and that changes how we do the job. Okay, I want to move on to the second principle, and a really, really important one that I think is often overlooked in sales. And that is a principle of consistency. In order to be regularly successful, day after day, week after week, and so on, I think there are certain fundamentals that underpin doing that. Everybody can be good sometimes. Everyone can be good when the leads are warm and the weather's hot and everyone's smiling and the economy's booming. Well, we've had a little bit of sunshine today in London, thankfully, but overall, for lots of markets, it's tough at the moment. And so having consistency when times are tough is when we really earn our money. So before I get on to consistency in sales, I actually want to tell you a story about Christmas many years ago, and then hopefully I can link that back to consistency in sales for you. For those of you who received the teaser email yesterday, you know that I was promising to teach you to juggle, and that's about to come. So I was in my late teens. For some reason, I decided I wanted to learn how to juggle. I don't know why. And so our parents bought me and my brothers some juggling balls for Christmas. I'd have been about 18 or 19. And what happens, if you know the same if you've ever bought those sets of juggling balls, you'll get some instructions like these that you can see on the screen now, with lots of different diagrams and numbers of showing you how to do it. And I was doing this sort of step-by-step guide in this book. I was 2 hours in, 3 hours in, whatever it might be, and I was getting absolutely nowhere. Around midday, past midday, a friend of mine put around, Brian, and he saw me trying to juggle, and hey presto, Brian could juggle. Clever old Brian. And he told me to put the booklet down and said, I will teach you to juggle, and it really will not take you very long. And I just want to go to full screen now, which is the chance for me to show you my juggling skills, or rather to be embarrassed at my lack of juggling skills. But I want to just illustrate to you how he taught me to do it, and then I'll come back to consistency in sales. So Brian came around, I'll step back slightly so you can see me, and he said, here's the thing, Paul. When you learn to juggle 3 balls, you don't learn to juggle by juggling 3 balls. You learn to juggle 3 balls by juggling 1 ball. And here's what he told me. You start with 1 ball and you throw it from side to side. Nice little arc going across side to side. I can almost guarantee, by the way, if you can do that, you can juggle. Only once I'd done that 20 times without dropping it did Brian allow me to take the second ball. And the second ball, you do the same thing. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. If you can do that, then you definitely can juggle. Again, once I'd done that 20 times, I was allowed to pick up the third ball, which is when it can go wrong. Bear with me. And you do the same thing. It's the same thing. You're looping in the same way with 3. And there we go. I know you all want to clap, but I thank you for that, but you're not able to do so. If you want any questions to ask me about the juggling bit, you can save them until the end. I will probably focus on the sales questions before the juggling questions. So the point around the juggling is that those instructions were really complicated. It was really difficult to understand those elements. And I think the same thing often happens in sales. There are so many different elements involved, so many different pathways you can take in order to have a successful sale. And I think very often we complicate the sales process. And I would like to do for you in the next section what Brian did for me in that short session. By the way, by about 5 o'clock on Christmas Day, I could juggle. I tested it with my children a few years ago, and they were by far quicker than me. And it was about an hour to an hour and a half, and they were already juggling. Not at the level where they'd be going to Covent Garden to perform for the public, but they were juggling within about 90 minutes. And no, my children are not geniuses. They're just kids, and they learned how to do it pretty quickly. So the challenge, if we go to sales and we think it's really complicated, is that we take what is a complex process. Selling is complex, but I think selling is complex because people are complex. The process itself is relatively simple, and we certainly should try and make it as simple as possible. When I first started training a few years ago, working for another company, very good sales training company, but I was over in, I think it was in Ireland, training a team out there, and I thought that perhaps it was time for me to take the lead in my own sales training to simplify. I think at that time there were 6 or 7 steps in the process and the conversation that they were training, and doing it very well, by the way. I have nothing against what they were doing. They were an outstanding company, but I felt it could be simplified. And as I sat there with a pint of Guinness at this hotel bar in Cork, it became clear to me that there are actually 4 steps in most sales conversations, and those 4 steps largely come in the same order. As I finished the Guinness, all I needed to do was to name those 4 steps. And I don't claim credit, by the way, for I invented these 4 steps. Just by then, I've been selling for quite a few years. I trained a lot of people. I'd listened to thousands of different phone calls and watched hundreds of different meetings, as well as doing them myself. And there are 4 steps. And the training that we now do is based around these 4 steps. And we build out various bits of content around the 4 steps. And as you might guess, and as I promised, I want to share those 4 steps with you now. So you can see them all there on the screen. What I tend to do in the workshops that I run with clients is work backwards, really, and ask people, what have we got to do? But we often consider, okay, what's the most important thing? What do we have to do at some stage in a sales conversation to make a living? It's step 3 there. We have to sell. We have to sell a product or a service to match the needs. But of course, we can't sell a product or service until we find out the needs. And I think that's a mistake still made by some sales teams, as they jump too quickly into selling themselves, selling their product, selling their service, when they've not actually identified the need fully. And so before we sell, working back from there, we have to ask questions. We ask questions to understand the client and the needs that they have. However, I don't think asking questions is the first part, certainly over the phone, which we're talking about today. Because if you just dive onto a phone call and start asking people questions, at some stage, they're going to interrupt you and say something like, what's the point of this phone call for me? And so I think there's a step before we ask questions, and I name that step earning the right to speak. Yes, I did it to make the acronym you can see on the screen there easy to work. If you're going to use acronyms, you should make them easy to remember. That's the very point of them. But I also think earning the right to speak captures what we're doing on outbound calls. You call somebody up, they answer. That means they're free to speak. I say that even though it sounds obvious, because people forget that sometimes. If you answer your phone, as we all do now, or invariably we do now, it's on a mobile phone, there is accept or decline. If somebody answers the phone, they've hit accept, they are free to speak. If somebody calls me now, I will not answer the phone. I'll decline. So if they're free to speak, all that's now happening is, do they want to speak to you? And in those first 10, 15, 20 seconds, we have to earn the right to speak. Only then we get a platform to ask questions to understand them and their needs. Only then can we decide if we think we can help, and then we position how we can help. And then finally, I think it's about yes or no to an agreed next step. Please, please, please don't misconstrue the yes or no to a next step as a hard sell. I'm not a believer in pinning people's hands to the table before they or until they sign a deal. But every sales process is a step-by-step process. Every buying process has certain steps, and part of our job in sales is to ascertain if people have the commitment to move forward and then agree what that next step is. And yes or no to that next step is critical, rather than the worst answer in sales, which of course is not no, but the worst answer in sales is maybe. So how does structure help? Well, first of all, almost anything you do in your lives that you do consistently well will have a structure or a process, from the way you get ready for work in the mornings, to the way you do certain recipes, to the order in which you water your garden, whatever it might be. Anything you do efficiently, successfully, and consistently well will have a process or a structure that you've built and that you trust. And that allows you much more likely to be consistent in anything. I touched earlier, anyone can be good sometimes. Only certain people can be good, maybe not all the time, but most of the time. And structure facilitates that. Contrary to popular misconception, structure actually enables you. It gives you a platform. It doesn't restrict you. Sometimes I hear people talk to me and say, oh, Paul, every client's different. Every need is different. So every conversation is completely different. I agree with the first 2 points. I disagree with the third. Yes, every client is different. Every need, it can vary, but you're not selling to that many different needs, whatever you sell. There'll be 3 or 4 or 5 key needs that you sell into, either based around desire or about efficiency or around fear. And then certainly the third bit is, if you're talking to a similar client profile with similar challenges and selling similar products and services, then yes, every call and every meeting is a bit different, but it's not completely different. And structure enables you to be more consistent. I think there's a mistake sometimes in that just because we can't prepare for everything, we think we should prepare for nothing. And I would suggest in an outbound telesales call, and this applies to whether it's warm business or cold outbound calling, there's probably 70 to 85% of the conversation that you can prepare for. And by having that preparation, it actually enables you to be much more productive on the call, because it allows you to do the most important thing in sales, which is listen to clients. If your brain is filled with, how am I going to pitch this? Which story am I going to tell later? Which case study do I bring to light? What's the next step to close them? And how do I position that? Then your brain's jumped ahead and you're not listening to a client. And so you're much more able to relax and listen if you know where you are going. And the final point around the structure is that you can cheat. And as I hope you know from my first point around the fact that sales is based on honesty, I don't mean being dishonest with people, but here's how you can cheat. You can have notes. I still find it remarkable how rarely people selling over the phone are happy to have notes in front of them. Under pressure, it's really difficult to retain clarity. Mike Tyson, the boxer, famously said, everybody has a plan until you punch them on the nose. And that's what often can happen in sales calls, is you think that someone's going to be warm and receptive to you, and they're not, because that's life. Sometimes, and we can lose our bearings and lose our thread and lose where we are in the conversation. Have notes. If the conversation is warm and it's open and they're chatting to you and you know exactly where you're going to take the call, then maybe you don't need those notes. But in many cases, that's not true. So have notes in front of you. Certainly when you're trying to adapt to new behaviors and new skills or new ideas, it is hugely helpful to have notes in front of you. So what I have there on the sheet, on the screen, is a template that we use for clients, and we normally give them a blank templates. I said to you earlier, I'm a great believer in structure, but I don't believe in scripts. So we typically share ideas with people. We share the psychology behind ideas. We'll give examples of the way to word things, but we always want people to be using their own words. It's much more powerful when we sell in the language that's most natural to us. And so we leave these blank and people fill them in as they go through the training. And I often, in the annual programs we run, when I go back in each month to visit clients, I will check what notes they have at their desk. And yes, I have an agenda, clearly, because I believe in these checklists, but I can promise you that so often when people's behaviors are not as strong, when they're not being as consistent, when they're having problems, it's because they have stopped having reminder notes in front of them. I cannot emphasize enough how beneficial it is to have notes in front of you. On that, by the way, I'm very happy to share the easy template with people. So either now, if you wish, or at the end of the presentation, if you want to keep focused on what we're doing here, then do drop us a line to receive a free easy template. We can also send you one that's completed. Just as an example, I wouldn't recommend you use the completed one for yourself or with your teams, but it just gives you some idea of the level of detail, the level of prompt that you can do on your own version. So if you drop us an email in the next day or so on that, then we'll send you both versions. We'll send you a completed version and a blank version. And we're quite happy to send those as soft copies. You can print them off and use them yourself. Probably a good moment as well, just to mention, if you want to book a call to find out about more, the kind of work we do, helping telesales teams, which I guess is your focus if you're on this webinar today, or if you've got face-to-face salespeople, do drop a line. Happy to spend 15, 20 minutes on the phone, find out what your needs are. And we'll be honest with you. I'll tell you if I think we can help and give evidence of how we can help. And if not, then I'll do my best to give you some other referral, perhaps another company, another trainer that might be able to help you. So yeah, get in touch. Happy to share the easy template with you. Okay, moving on to confidence. I often refer to confidence as the secret source of success in life. Everything is so much better when we have confidence. And the reason I think it's so critical to sales, other than the obvious bits I'm perhaps about to walk you through now, is that I think very often as leaders, whether we're sales leaders or company leaders, we're very bad at giving our sales teams confidence. But I'll come back to that shortly. So why is it a secret sauce? What difference does confidence make? Well, first of all, the belief that it illustrates is captivating. My favorite definition of sales is the transfer of enthusiasm. And when people have a belief in what they do, the product or the service, the results that people get, and they deliver that with confidence, it's compelling. It's one of the reasons why I find many entrepreneurs are very good at selling what they do, although they're not necessarily very good at training their teams to do it, because they do it on just a very natural sell in a product or service that they've developed from often their own need. It's very, very powerful to do, and confidence does that. And you can hear when people don't have that belief and don't have that confidence, the message gets a bit lost. I think that confidence gives a clarity to a message, allows you to get it across to your audience in a shorter form. And it also provides clarity to your role. Having belief in what you're saying, I think gives you clarity about what you're trying to achieve. None of us are trying to sell everything to everybody. Remember, we're trying to sell the right product or service to people who have the need, because that means they will like us, they'll keep using us, and they'll refer us to others. And having confidence helps us to do that. It also clears your mind, makes you much more focused when you are clear about the main reasons that you're going to put something across. And then finally, and importantly, and I think this matters in all jobs, but I think it especially matters in sales, which is tough sometimes to do, is it makes any job more fun when you can do it with confidence. And that's not just true of our jobs, that's true of our life, whether we're playing tennis, whether we're singing, whether we're out socializing, whatever it might be. Everything's more fun if we feel confident doing it. So what's the problem with confidence? I think we misunderstand it, is my first starting point. I think we believe that confidence is just one type of confidence. We think about social confidence, people being comfortable in a social situation, a bar, a restaurant, whatever it might be, a networking event through work. And social confidence is a kind of confidence, but it's not the only kind of confidence. The illustrations, the images I put there on the screen are example. I could be wonderfully confident socially, but put me in charge of flying a plane and I'd very quickly not be very confident. Or ask me to perform surgery on somebody, the same thing. Ask a confident person in the restaurant or bar to deliver a very difficult, complex sales presentation to a discerning customer, and they'd lack confidence. And as I've recently found out in my own life, as my eldest child turned 17, teaching young people to drive, I think particularly young men, speaking from one experience, which is not great data, I appreciate, is that they have an enormous amount of confidence and then they jump behind the wheel of a car and they are incompetent. And actually, confidence is linked to competence. When we are not very good at things, other than my son's first 1 or 2 driving lessons, when we're not very good at things, we lack confidence. Confidence is built through building competence. So social confidence is not the same as sales confidence, though I concede it can help when you start a career. So if we accept that confidence in selling is not just ingrained and not the same as social confidence, how do we as leaders, or if we're just managing ourselves, make sure that we give ourselves the best chance of building confidence? Well, first of all, recognize that sales is a teachable skill. So train people first. There's a regular debate that I've heard over many years of, not everyone can sell. You can either sell or you can't, gift of the gab and all this stuff. I think in almost all cases, it's nonsense. Sales is a skill. And if it's a skill, you can teach people to do it. I'm often asked if it's possible to teach anybody to be able to sell well. I think it's a good question, but I think in many ways, it's the wrong question. The better question is, can you help anybody to communicate more effectively? And the answer to that is palpably yes. Whether they can then be good at sales or not depends much more on their mindset, much more on whether they want to be good at sales than whether they can be good at sales. So I'm a great believer that anybody can learn how to sell. It does not mean the same thing as everyone becoming a great salesperson. That's first thing. Secondly, on the leadership side, on the management side, and I see this so often, it has to be said, is too often we spend our time in sales management thinking that, these confident salespeople, they know what they're doing. They're always trying to find a way to get around the system and sell something and make more commission. Where our job as a management team is to keep their feet on the floor. It's not. Sales is difficult. If you don't know it's difficult, then you haven't done it for a while. So sales is difficult. It's one of those things I often compare to marathon running. I know I've never run a marathon. And the compatibility between those two things is the concept, the theory of running a marathon is easy. The execution is difficult. And so your job as a sales leader, a sales manager, is not to keep your sales team's feet on the floor. It's to lift their feet off the floor. It's to elevate them. It's to celebrate them. It's to remind them again and again how good they can be. Almost all psychological research will tell you that most people are better with encouragement than they are with criticism. And it's this, I don't know, if you're a football fan, you might always think of Alex Ferguson, the ex-Manchester United manager, and was well known for their hairdryer treatment and, giving a player a hard time. But actually, if you read about Alex Ferguson, and certainly around the way sports management works now, managers and coaches spend much more time telling their players how good they are rather than telling them what mistakes they made. So please, if you are constantly on the back of your sales team, recognize that's a weight they don't need to carry. Your job's to elevate them, not keep their feet on the floor. The next two elements around confidence in sales link back to what I've already talked about. So belief in product or service and belief in the importance of your job helps to give you confidence. If you genuinely believe that you're there to help people, that you do that by finding out the truth, and you're just trying to find out the truth so you can present a compelling option to them, having that belief around honesty helps your confidence. And then the fourth point there, having structure, whether it's the easy structure, which obviously is what we teach it, we base our training around, or something else. Structure gives confidence. If you are good at a certain recipe, in most cases, you'll do the same processes in the same order again and again. It's much easier to do. And then the final point I want to make around confidence is the best way to build confidence at anything is to practice. And I wanted to end with this point because it's one of the greatest mistakes made in sales, I think, is the lack of practice. To share this with you, the one element, I've been doing training now for over 10 years, the one element that's consistently listed in pre-trading questionnaires as the least favorite sales training activity is role play. People request, please, can we not do role play? And yet the one element that's most often praised and mentioned as the favorite part after the training is sales role play. People think they don't want to do it, but it's actually the most valuable thing you can do in training. Let me give you an example. A few years ago, working with a property investment company, and we'd been spending a little bit of time on the beginning of a conversation. We were talking about, how to earn the right at the beginning of a conversation, and then how to ask questions. And I said to them, let's actually go out onto the sales floor and let's do some role plays actually on the phone with each other. So a team of 6, and you're going to call each other and do the role plays. And then we'll do a little bit of a feedback session, see how that went, and then we'll make some real calls to real clients. Anyway, we go out, they do the role plays. There's a real buzz in the room, and they messed up a few times, but everyone going along. I remember the 2 owners came out to see what all the noise was about because everyone was on the phone at the same time. And there was such an energy and enthusiasm and dynamism in the room that at the end of the role plays, I said, actually, let's jump on the phones now. Let's just make the calls. We'll do the feedback session later. And we had an hour of calls, and then we do the feedback. Each of them said on the feedback, oh, it's really weird doing the role play, and we felt a bit silly doing it. But actually, once we got started, it was a bit of fun, So we got over the feeling of awkwardness and a bit of fun, and it was a really good way to warm up to make calls. And we feel like the calls we made to clients were better because we'd had a bit of a warm up. And so I said to them, okay, that's interesting. Why don't you do that every day? First thing in the morning, just do that every day. You just told me how beneficial it was. And they all started frowning, and that phrase you see there in red on the screen came out. Oh, I don't know, just feels a bit silly doing that. I get that. Of course it does. I got over that years ago. So I've done role plays for so many years. I'm over that silliness. So, but if that's the only downside, let's consider what the upsides are. Surely you've just said yourself, it helps you improve. If you improve at selling, then you'll help more clients, give more value to more people. And that means that the company makes more profit. The company makes more profit. Then you probably get more commission. So you're earning more yourself. And that income that you earn gives you more choices in life. So this activity, role play, call it whatever you want, practice, this activity makes you better at your job, makes the company more money, makes more clients happy, and gives you a better lifestyle. And you don't want to do it because it makes you feel a bit silly. It doesn't make any sense. Surely the benefits massively outweigh the downsides, and we should be doing it. And so I'd like to encourage you, if you want to be consistent, want your team to be consistent, please think again about the idea of practicing. I think what happens often, by the way, is that role play's got a bit of a bad name, and I think very often they're done in the wrong way. So we've got a guide actually to doing sales role play as well, that along with the easy template, I'm happy to send out to people about, whether it's audience participation, how to do it, just some logistical elements that often cause the most problems. And it's what people tend to think about when they have that negative feeling about sales role plays. You can take all of those away and actually make it a really productive way to help your teams to be more consistent. So do drop us a line on that email address or give us a call, and we can get that out to you as well as the easy template. Okay, all right, summary of what we've done so far, and time for questions in just a couple of minutes. So do please, whether you're on LinkedIn or on YouTube, then post any questions. You can't speak on this webinar, unfortunately, but do post a question or two, and we'll get to those in a moment or two. So today I wanted to share with you 3 principles that I believe underpin the consistent success on the phone when we are selling. By being honest, we change how we think about our job. It triggers us into the right activities and reminds us of the value that we offer. We're not pestering people. We're not disturbing them. We're trying to help them. That fundamentally changes how we see our role in our job and how we see ourselves. Consistency is one of the hardest things to achieve in all walks of life. We can all win sometimes and lose a lot more. How do we find a way to win more often? In almost every field of human endeavor, consistency comes with process. It comes with structure. And the easy sales structure is a way to enable your team to be more consistent whilst not binding them into something that's too tight and restricts them from being themselves. And then the final secret sauce is confidence. So allow people to understand the essence of their role, give them a structure to perform that, and then support them. Supporting means building them up, not knocking them down. And it also means giving them room to practice what they do. So last reminder before we wait for questions to crop up. If you can post those where I can see them on LinkedIn and YouTube, that would be really helpful. If you do want an easy template sending, or you're looking for the role play tips, we're very happy to send those out to you. So just drop us a line. You can see the details there on the screen. If you want to find out more about how we can help, the best way of doing that is for me not to send you a brochure or a proposal or anything like that. Let's just book a call. In 15, 20 minutes, I can find out a bit more about the challenges you have in the market. If we can help, I'm happy to share how. If we can't, I'm happy to tell you, and where possible, refer you to others. So please do get in touch if you want to take that next step. Just to summarize what we do, well, it's telesales training, obviously, that I've talked about today. We do also offer face-to-face training. All training is tailored to your needs. Part of our process is coming to visit you, spend time, understand what the challenges are for your teams. That can be done in person, or it's done live online. And we've actually got a True Sales Academy coming soon with some content, which I will let you all know about once it's live in a couple of months. Really, really good online training. I think there's a massive gap in the market that's not being filled by anybody right now. But as things stand, in-person training or live online. We do annual programs. A probably overwhelming majority of our clients have annual programs. So typically every 4 to 6 weeks, we're back with them. But for smaller companies or lesser needs or a desire to try us out, try before you buy, then we can do shorter sessions as well. And for all clients, particularly those on the longer term programs, there are templates, there are checklists, there's ongoing coaching support, a range of different things. Training is partly about sharing good ideas with people, but it's mostly about supporting them to implement those ideas, much like the checklist manifesto story. Okay, so coming into now for questions and looking at my screen to see what is there. I thought those of you who are still with us and thinking, should you do any business with the True Sales Company and try and find a way to work with Paul, I won't read them out to you, but I thought it might be useful to have 3 clients who worked over the years with some fairly typical comments that are made about the training that we deliver. And there's lots more on our website if you want to just go and check them out there. And just before I go to the first question, I want to take you right back to the beginning of today's presentation, the checklist manifesto. You may remember that I said by the simple implementation of a checklist, they were able to reduce disabilities caused by surgery by 36% and deaths caused by surgery by 47%. The great shame is nearly 20 years on, they have still failed to get the checklist manifesto agreed across the world. So we know in that world something that can massively help. The challenge comes in the fact that people don't do it. Knowledge is not power. Knowledge is not success. The implementation of knowledge is the key. Okay, what do we have question-wise? Somebody sent me a question halfway through, actually, which hopefully will get added to soon. They asked me a question about common mistakes on managing telesales teams. I think they fall broadly into 3, as a couple I've touched on already. I think that the danger can be when we go into management, if we're no longer doing the selling ourselves, is we forget that execution is much harder than theory. Anyone can tell a team, I'll get on the phone, introduce yourself, ask some questions. It's much harder to do. And so, make sure you stay grounded yourself on what's needed. Secondly, as I mentioned in the confidence building time, try and find ways to praise people much more than you criticize. We do it all the time. I gave a presentation the other day and it went well, thankfully. Hopefully today has as well. And at one stage, I quoted some figures, and the only time one person spoke up was when my figures didn't quite add up by a tiny amount. We're very, very quick at human beings at picking up on mistakes, and we're very, very poor at picking up on positive things. So look for the positive in people. If they are doing, I don't know, the selling phase of a sales conversation and they're doing, I don't know, 4 or 5 out of 10 would be how you would rate them. And then you do some training with them and they go to a 6 out of 10. Don't get exasperated that they've not gone to 9, but praise them for going to 6. You will already, in that praise, make them a little better and maybe get to them a 7. And the last thing I think that happens often in telesales management is we don't separate managing from coaching. And they're two very different roles to perform. I won't lecture here on the managing side, but the coaching side is about enablement of change. It's very, very difficult to make changes. And we're much more likely to do that with a very structured way of coaching, which is not about KPIs. It's not about quarterly reviews. It's about the skills on the phone. So try and find a way, if you can, to separate the times when you meet people as their manager and when you meet people as their coach. Okay, we've got a quiet crowd today. I'm not seeing any questions popping up on YouTube right now or on LinkedIn. So if you have posted one and I haven't seen it, feel free to post again. But if that is the case, then with the clock ticking to 5 to 3 and me committing to be finished by 3 o'clock, I would like to thank you once again for your time today. I hope you have found it useful, you found it interesting. If you're walking away with 1 or 2 ideas that can help you do a better job, then I like to think that's a good use of 1 hour of your time. Do look us up. I've mentioned a few times, get in touch if you want to book a call to go through your challenges. Do let us know if you want the easy template or the guide to doing sales role plays better. If you prefer a hands-off approach, then tune into our podcast. It's on all the main platforms. As I mentioned earlier, one released every week. Do tune in and check out ideas there. You walk away from each podcast, I would think, with 2 or 3 new ideas. And of course, I can't end without plugging the book. I obviously like it. I think it's helpful. If you are a book person, then do look it up and you will be able to find that on all the main booksellers. So the final thanks for your time. I wish you a happy and successful Thursday afternoon and a brilliant week. And I look forward to speaking to at least some of you again very soon. Thanks for your time.